Hey everyone. For the longest time in the industry, there's been this push-pull, this friction between developers and sysadmins. I mean, to me, it's kind of like cats and dogs, right? But the two groups can coexist, and they should. When those two groups can work well together, we can make amazing things happen, right? And so on today's episode of SysAdmin Weekly, I've got Eric Siron on, and we're going to be talking about this very issue. How can devs do better? How can sysadmins do better? How can they work together to make our infrastructure, our networks, our software better, and lots more on today's episode of SysAdmin Weekly. Hey folks, it's a new week. That means it's time for another episode of SysAdmin Weekly. This is your podcast by sysadmins, for sysadmins, and dedicated to the tireless tech folks that are working in the trenches day in and day out to keep our digital world spinning. As always, I'm your host, Andy Syrewicze, and I've got my regular co-host with me today. I've got Eric Siron. How's it going, Eric?
I'm all right. How you doing? Apologize for the lopsided video. I just now realized that.
No, your video's fine. I think you're framed up better than some guests I've had on the show. See, now I'm getting vertigo. The camera's moving, and I don't know.
Well, we got to add some excitement. I can't get folks onto a roller coaster, so I'll just do this instead.
You're going to do this instead. Fair enough. So, I got to say, it's good having somebody in the room with me here. I did our very first solo host episode of SysAdmin Weekly last week, and while I don't mind doing solo episodes, it's kind of weird talking to myself for an hour. So I will say that what we did in last week's episode, in case folks did not get a chance to see that yet, is I spent some time going through how do I want to put it here? Some unhinged job postings, let's put it that way, where basically everybody wants a unicorn and nobody wants to pay anything for said unicorn. So anyway, if you want to check that out, go ahead and take a look at last week's episode. But of course, I've got Eric on with us today, and we are talking about an argument as old as IT, I guess I would say. There's always been this kind of push-pull between sysadmins and developers. It's like dogs and cats, right? You're trying to get them to coexist. And so I've known a lot of developers, and I have to preface this entire episode with, this is not a developer bashing session. That's not what this is about at all. But what it comes down to is that these two cohorts, sysadmins and developers working together, it really is about labor, time, and risk, right? Because the amount of effort that things take, the amount of time things take, and of course, the operational risk associated with the work output of both groups can make or break the IT systems of an organization, right? And so that's what we're talking about today, is those two groups coexisting, what each group can do better, and how we can make the whole system work better for everyone is kind of what I'm hoping the takeaway will be at the end of today's episode. But before we get to that, we have our recurring segments, and I suppose I will start by getting my plugs out of the way. So if you're new to the show, welcome. Glad to have you here. And if you want a link to all the, basically a link to a place that has all the links associated with the show, Inception for links here. You want to find a link? Here's a link. Anyway, you can find all the links associated with the show at www.sysadminweekly.com. And, you'll find links to the Apple version of the show, the podcast, Spotify, Amazon, the YouTube channel, as well as a link to our newsletter at newsletter.sysadminweekly.com. Newsletter's been a little quiet lately just because it's year end. Things have been busy in the SysAdmin Weekly offices, and, working on getting the newsletter rolling again. So with that, we have our regular recurring segments on the show here. Of course, the first recurring segment we have is our News React segment. And this is the segment of the show where my co-host and I, we talk about one, kind of eye-catching news item that we came across. And, well, I suppose, Eric, selfishly, I will start first today. And the news item that caught my eye, and probably a lot of people's eyes, is on December 5th, 5 days ago as of this recording, there was yet again another Cloudflare outage. And I knew this because, well, AndyOnTech.com was affected, SysAdminWeekly.com was affected, and I've heard, things all over the internet that, things were affected in various ways. And, I was kind of looking at Cloudflare. They have a nice, what I would call a post-mortem that literally was updated like minutes before we hit record on this. But essentially what it comes down to is, and I'm quoting their article here, right? A portion of Cloudflare's network began experiencing significant failures. The incident was resolved at, so 8:47, the incident starts. They had resolution by 9:12. So 25 minutes of total impact, right? But this is what I found kind of interesting about this. They're very quick to say, hey, the issue was not caused directly or indirectly by a cyber attack on Cloudflare systems, which, most large vendors like Cloudflare that experience an issue like this because of press reasons, they're usually going to point that out very quickly, right? So that's all, kind of what I was expecting. What kind of caught my eye here was this next sentence here. So instead, they basically said it wasn't a cyber attack. Instead, it was triggered by changes being made to our body parsing logic while attempting to detect and mitigate an industry-wide vulnerability disclosed this week in React server components. Which is fine. I don't know, unless you watch the CVEs really closely, yes, there was a very nasty React vulnerability moving around recently in the tech circles here. But this to me feels like, yeah, we went offline, but it's their fault. That's really what this article sounds like to me. It's like, and that's fine if that's the case, but like, it all comes back to this discussion that we've had on the show before, where we've talked about this concept of vendor overdependence, right? And when an issue at Cloudflare or AWS East, I'm going to call out again, right? When a single incident at one of those vendors can take down a percentage of the internet, I think we have a problem as an industry, don't we? Isn't that kind of a problem? We spend so much time in our sysadmin trenches trying to eliminate single points of failure that we've, in some ways, created a monoculture here for certain services, right? So anyway, I'm going to get off that soapbox. I'll put a link to to that particular article in the show notes, folks, so you can check that out. But that was my news item for this week. Eric, what do you got?
Well, that's interesting on yours. I think it's going to lead directly into some of the stuff that we're talking about. And it's not, of course, just software industry. You have same thing across the board. Like one of the things that has shocked me for a long time, there's only 2 manufacturers of vehicle tires in the world. There's a lot of labels.
I didn't know that.
There's a lot of labels, but there's only 2 manufacturers. They all source back to 2 different places. So you're choosing between brand A and brand B, although you got if you ever want to get down some weird rabbit holes, like I may have talked about this on the show before, but like when you go into the store and you want to buy some strawberries, you're buying from like 3 different brands in the world, or at least, well, I guess it's probably not in the world, but at least in the United States. And so like, and one of the things I watched, like in Iowa, there's like a berry baron who controls like almost every single berry that's produced in the state. And so it's like, it's wild how few separate things there are anymore. And I'm going to say later as we get into this, I think that is directly contributed to a lot of the problems that we're facing everywhere. Is concentration of everything into one place or 2 places, So my News React segment is, and I think I'm continuing a trend here where I'm just like, so I want to be careful. Like, I don't hate AI, but oh my God, it's not as good as they want us to believe it is. And stop putting so many eggs in that basket. But so Ignite was that last week or the week? It doesn't matter.
Two,
Ignite
3 weeks ago.
2025, whenever that was. So after that, Nadella gets on and he's like, look, I participated in this skill championship thing and I
I
used
saw that.
Copilot to do it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
so you mean Copilot participated and you took credit for the work in a competition? Dude, no.
So folks that folks that are new, they may not know that I sit with one foot in tech, sysadmin, systems engineering, evangelism. The other one kind of sits in the marketing world because of where I sit in my day job. And so I could tell you right now that conversations were had at Microsoft amongst PR and marketing that said, "Hey, this would be a great idea. Let's do that."
And
And so
that's fine, but also want to say that it's Satya's decision what happens at that company.
exactly,
And he's
very
just
true.
like, yeah, that's cool. Let's just do that. And then meanwhile, yesterday, I kid you not, yesterday, there's something I was looking up. I was just double checking something, PowerShell things. Like, I know how to do this, just kind of forget. So let me ask Copilot, let it do all the searching for me. And it came back with like a commandlet that doesn't exist with parameters that don't exist. And I literally said, did you hallucinate that? And man, Copilot didn't get mad at me, dude, but it got defensive.
That little
That was so funny. But it's like, okay, fine, here it is. I'm like, nope, that's not a thing either. Oh, well, fine. Like, stop. Like, this is, and so finally I just went into Google and searched it and found, second hit. Yeah, that's what I want.
Yep.
So, and Google's gotten crappier too due to their reliance on AI. And somebody was telling me the other day, Meta AI. So, can't remember what she uses it exactly for, but she would go in under whatever account she's using. Meta owns so much stuff now. I don't even know which product it was in, but she went in and she goes in and she just searches for things like, this is the hashtag that I want to look at. And so she'd go into search, put in the hashtag and type out, whatever, and hit search, and she'd get her things. Well, they've pulled out their old search and they threw in Meta AI, and she puts that in, and the thing is like, well, you spelled that wrong. What you really wanted was this. And then it's like she can't get to the stuff she wants anymore because they've replaced basic freaking search with AI. She's like, I know exactly what I want. It's been working for however many years. And
this is some of the stuff we're going to get into. I have a story along these lines too. Man, yeah, so AI, so much of the world wants it to be the answer to everything. And my wife and I were just talking about this like an hour before we hit record here. And like, I guess I would say I'm neutral on AI. I see it as strictly a tool. That's what it is. It's a tool.
Mhm.
And I really like using it for things like, okay, here's something I wrote about this topic, review it, and then challenge my assumptions. Make the counter arguments to what is in this article or whatever it is, right? I love it for doing stuff like that because it allows me to see the other side of the argument and make sure I didn't miss something, right? The other thing I really like about it is kind of the deep search stuff. So if I'm researching a topic, instead of having to put in general search terms and manually drill down into like 12, 15 different articles, it's really good at grabbing information from a whole collection of different sources all at once, which is fairly nice from an operational perspective anyway. So, but yes.
But you got to be careful. It has no discernment, and it will make things up as it goes. Like, well, I don't know what to say here, so let me just invent something. And that's
correct. And so GPT is probably the one I use the most. And you can kind of train it a little bit how you prefer it to work. And mine has explicit instructions that if you cannot verify something with a tangible source, you are to say, I don't know instead. And here's the thing. It doesn't always listen to that rule. Once in a while, it's still, I have to call it out and be like, that doesn't look right. And, well, anyway. Yes, I think we'll have to do a how do we use AI personally type of episode at some point here somewhere. It's just kind of a gut check. be a good one to have our friend Mike Nelson back for, because I know he's really into the AI stuff. So anyway. So our next segment of the show is our Nerd Hour segment. This, of course, is the portion of the show that does not take an hour, but we call it Nerd Hour. There's a joke behind that. Go back and check out the early episodes. Anyway, we talk about the geeky, nerdy things that we have been working on in our spare time. And Eric, I'll let you take a crack at this one first. What's the geeky, nerdy stuff you've been working on?
Well, I haven't been able to because I've been dealing with the topic of this article in really terrible software that's not allowing me to have any personal time. So
There it is.
off we go.
Off we go. So I get the feeling we're going to hear a little bit more about this today.
Mhm.
So
And I'll keep doing it until somebody finally goes, oh, hey, maybe we should do something about that.
right. Well, I haven't had a ton of spare time either, but the little bit I have had, I have actually been doing some more stuff in K3S, which is Kubernetes Lite, inside of my home lab. I mentioned during the episode last week that I'd recently moved my lab's DNS stack to that, so I could phase out a couple of old Raspberry devices. And I have since also set up an apt caching server. So unless you work in the Linux world, you probably don't know what apt is. Apt is a package manager that was originally from the Debian distribution of Linux, but it's also present in Ubuntu, Mint, and a bunch of other places that I can't even think of off the top of my head.
Is Ubuntu no
What's that?
longer a Debian derivative? It used to be.
So that's a good question. I haven't looked at Canonical stance on that in a while. It was a Debian derivative. I don't know as if they still pull from Debian stable or if they have their own core repos now, but they still use apt as a package manager at the very least.
Yeah.
So
one thing I
that's a good
noticed
question.
transitioning from Ubuntu to Debian is I didn't have to learn much.
Right. Yep. They're operationally very, very similar. Just Canonical has put a lot of enterprisey type stuff inside of Ubuntu these days, which it's fine. I mean, they're a direct competitor to SUSE and Red Hat these days, right? So to be expected a little bit. They don't push the commercial stuff quite as hard as SUSE and especially Red Hat. So, which is nice. But anyway, yeah. So an apt caching server is basically a server that sits on my lab that anytime one of my, I think, like 9 Debian boxes in the lab now makes a request to a software repository, it will first check this caching server to see if the package exists there. If not, it'll automatically go out to the public repos and grab it and put it on the caching server. So, like I said, I've got like 8, 9 Debian boxes in the lab. It makes sense to, only have to pull down update packages one time. So
in theory.
Anyway, I think I set that up while I was drinking morning coffee one morning. I've got, like I said, K3S running in my lab now, Kubernetes. I just went out, I grabbed a Docker container, threw a couple of basic configuration parameters into place, and poof, I've got apt cacher running on my environment. Super fast, super easy. I've been really impressed with the experience with K3S lately. So I have to do an episode about that. It's a lot of interesting stuff there.
That's working for you. You know the old joke in software development is the top 3 problems in writing software are caching and off by 1 errors.
Yep, I believe that. I believe that. Yep, it's been working well, and everybody, Eric, and everybody that watches the show know I've been a diehard VM guy for a long time. I'm starting to get pulled in the Kubernetes microservices direction a little bit these days. I've been pleasantly surprised at the ecosystem's come a long ways, right? So anyway, that's my geeky, nerdy item. The other thing I want to do before we get to our core segment is we have a comment I want to review. So I went through a lot of comments on the show last week, just getting caught up. And if you would like to leave a comment on any episode, this one or any other, you can leave a comment out on the YouTube version of the show, or you can leave comments on the Spotify version of the show as well, too. Still in the process of getting some sort of centralized community application tool, communicate like a Discord or a Slack. There's a couple open source ones that I'm looking at too, just because I'm not huge on Discord and Slack is kind of the same, right? But I want barrier to entry to be as frictionless as possible for you all as well too. So anyway, until then, those are the ways you can comment on the episode. You can also send us an email at contact@sysadminweekly.com as well. So getting to this comment here. So this was a comment left on last week's episode where I talked about, like I said, those unhinged job postings. And basically the comment here said, and I'm quoting, where I work, they have issues with North Koreans getting U.S. citizens to apply for the job for them, go through the interview process, and then work remotely through the company-provided PC. Big issue with HIPAA. And so in my cybersecurity circles, I've seen this come up a lot frequently, and I've seen several variations of this. So the one that the commenter here is talking about is, North Korean threat actors will pay somebody in the U.S. like they said, interview for a job with the idea of getting hired, and then that threat actor will work, quote unquote, through that PC remotely. So it appears the traffic is originating from the US. And the whole goal there is to get, I guess, what you could call semi-legitimate access because they got, quote unquote, hired, right? And getting access to that data. Now, the other variation I've seen of it is threat actors. This seems to be a big thing out of North Korea right now. I've seen them also use AI to put the facade of somebody else on them during a live interview and pose as somebody popular from the IT community and get hired that way. And apparently there was I have to dig up the article. A couple of months ago, somebody actually got arrested because they were basically running like a laptop farm that threat actors were using here in the States to launch these types of scams. So it's been an interesting one to watch, I guess. So it's definitely an issue, and making things even more horrible in the hiring job market situation that we've got going on. So again, you want to hear more about that particular topic, check out last week's episode. Well, with that, Eric, we have got our main segment here again, where we are going to kind of talk about this relationship between sysadmins and developers and software standards, and how do we make this whole ecosystem better for everyone. And I thought maybe one of the good places to start here is, and I think everybody can agree on this, and you and I did, I think it was you and I, we did an episode not that long ago on the enshittification of enterprise software vendors. And that kind of ties into today's topic as well too. And so there's a term I've seen come up in the community here over the last couple of years that if I go back 10, 15, 20 years, I don't remember seeing come up that often. And that is good enough software. I get the idea. I get why it's called good enough, right? It's software that does what it's supposed to do and it does it okay, right? It's good enough. But I don't remember hearing that term, long term. It seems to be more of a recent thing. I've come across it probably 6, 7, 8 times here in the last couple of weeks, right? This idea of good enough software. And what I want to do here is talk about the impact of this idea of good enough software, right? And I think I want to preface this by saying, first off, there are certain situations and certain roles and, workloads on my network or my infrastructure that I'm probably okay with good enough, right? And when I say that, I'm thinking like things that if they go offline, it doesn't matter, right? Nobody notices. If it's just like a utility that I as a sysadmin use, good enough software is fine there, right? Stuff that doesn't impact production. But I have seen this good enough idea permeate into critical core workloads now, right? And we have multiple situations now recurring where software ships in an incomplete state. It's fragile, it's brittle, or half tested. Oh, the amount of seemingly half tested software I've come across in recent past is astronomical. And ultimately, the result of all this is ops team ultimately pay the bill, both in labor and sometimes in money too, right? And so I think that's where I would start this conversation. Before I continue on, Eric, I want to give you a chance to give your 2 cents as well.
A lot of things here that we have been warning about for a long time. When we went to the ability to update software over the internet, there were a lot of people saying, well, that means software is going to ship more buggy now because there's going to be less impetus to get it right the first time. They were correct. I'm not
Yep.
really sure we could have avoided that, to be honest with you, but it didn't happen overnight, and people kind of just went with it. I will say you could, from that point onward, release really bad software into the world and be, well, we're patching it, we're working on it, we're on it. Okay. Um, then, oh, just so many. So I think the testing thing just really hit me because I remember when Nadella came on, his first thing he did is we don't need testers, got rid of them all. And I don't know if that was started by him necessarily, but I think the rest of the software industry has said, "Oh yeah, that's a good idea. We don't need testers," and they're not doing that. And I don't know, when's the last time you saw an actual job, software testing job advertised? I don't think I have. And
Boy, it's been a long time.
so they talk like they're saving money, but they're not. And I kind of think we're already into the subject a little bit in that what happens then is developers toss their garbage out into the world, and then customers don't like it, so they call, but they don't talk to developers, they talk to support. So now the support staff is bigger, overwhelmed, can't keep up. The company's still in one way or another paying for it, but what they're doing, especially like at Microsoft, is they're charging the customer for that time.
Yep.
So they're paying themselves for having bad software is what they're doing. And it's
It almost
not particular to Microsoft. I mean, I'm picking on them a little bit here, but it's certainly not something that they're alone in by any stretch of the imagination.
right. And to me, it almost feels like forced beta testing is what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
There's that mantra in the industry. We're going to move fast and break things. And
Yeah.
to be honest, I think that's a terrible idea, but that's just me.
It depends on what your application's domain is. When it's
Right.
like
That too.
when it's my data center management software, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. And there has clearly become an issue with software testing, clearly an issue with software testing in the industry. I can give a personal recent example of this. This literally happened to me yesterday. And I was angry when I stumbled across this. So I'm not trying to pick on Microsoft, but this is with Microsoft Authenticator. This is the TOTP app that goes on your phone, right? And I'm using it specifically on
Temporary
iOS.
one-time password. You gotta expand those acronyms, bro.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Very true. And so I've used Microsoft Authenticator for I don't know how many years now, right? And as you can imagine, I work in security, so I have a billion MFA keys. Well, not a billion.
But
I
a
know
lot.
that the
Yeah.
number was specifically 43. I know that because it's important. It's important to this story. So I've had this issue with Authenticator over the last couple of weeks where whenever I try to add a new account, I get 2 very strange error messages and it fails to add the account. The first is you need to enable push notifications. Okay, verified push notifications are enabled. They're there. And then the next error it throws is some weird token error, and it says something along the lines of, "Please remove and reset up your account," basically. And so I'm staring at this error message the first time I got it, and I'm like, I have 43 MFA accounts in this app, right? That I can't add anymore. And here's where the anger came in. I started digging into this issue yesterday because I really needed to get something registered in MFA for work. Like, I really needed it. And I needed to get logged into this account, which required MFA. And so I started digging into this issue. Come to find out, and I haven't verified this in actual Microsoft documentation yet, but the behaviors I'm seeing are consistent with the explanation that I've seen online. And that is, there seems to be a soft limit for the number of accounts that can be added to Microsoft Authenticator. And it's somewhere between 40 and 50. There's no defined number. I was at 43. Now, what happens when this particular error message starts happening is the token, the underlying token that is associated with the device, ends up getting corrupted when there are too many accounts in the application. Now, here's where I got angry when I really started thinking about this. So, when I was getting ready to add account number 40, my expectation would be, oh, you have reached your account limit. Throw an error message. That's all you got to do. Throw an error message that says you have reached your account limitation. Please remove some. I would have been completely fine with that. That's okay. I can work around that. I can plan for that. But instead, what has happened now is no limit error message, and it has instead allowed silent corruption of the underlying token. And now the app is broken, and I have to re-register 43 accounts for MFA somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Somewhere else being the key word. Like, hey, if you don't want my business, cool. Bye.
Exactly. And so that is probably a project I'm doing this weekend. Is I can't trust it anymore. If you're just gonna and again, like I said, I haven't verified this directly with Microsoft documentation, but it certainly smells like this is the issue based on everything.
And even if it's not, that's more labor on your part.
Correct.
And this is where I keep coming, and I even complained about on LinkedIn the other day and immediately got challenged by people that I know are guilty of the exact thing I'm complaining about, that when something goes wrong, you have to give me enough to work with so that I know what my next step is. And of course, they jump out with, well, that's a security risk. Okay, no, you're just making things up. And I'm going to say this, and I will repeat it until I go whatever. If your developers do not understand their application domain well enough to make reasonable error messages, your developers should not be writing in that application domain at all. Because like the response is like, well, what do you want me to do? Just send you the entire stack trace? Like, no, not what I asked for. I need to know, what do I do next? Where do I go? And it's not a security risk to tell me that. And if it is, then you don't know what you're doing. And the other part of it is it's not I want to be really careful because you can get into some really broad statements that'll not be true everywhere. But I would say in general, it's not the developer's job to assume breach. It's the developer's job to assume that the authentication and authorization components did their job. And if I'm in this far now, you can tell me everything related to the task that I'm trying to accomplish and clearly failing at. And if it's my fault, fine, but you need to tell me that. You can't just do this. Well, something went wrong. Oh, well, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess. Go ahead.
No, it's sorry. And so my big rant was like, and I think I write a lot more software than you do. Stop me if I'm wrong on that. And I've been doing it for a long time. And so the older books on software development would say this code is not intended for production. It specifically say because it doesn't have good error checking. If something goes wrong, it's just going to halt or whatever. And over the years, they stopped saying that. And I think there's this assumption that, well, you should know that. You should know that. We shouldn't have to tell you that every time, that this is not how we're showing you how to complete whatever thing that we're instructing on. We're not building a 30-page program here with all the correct error messaging, because every time I've built, even if it's not going to just be me, it's going to be somebody else. If I'm going to hand even a script off to somebody, it usually winds up about 60% dealing with errors that might come up, because I don't want them calling me, well, I hit this and this thing happened, right? It's like I'm writing the scripts and the programs that I would want to use, and yeah, it does take a lot of effort to do good error messaging. And what's happening now is they take all their code, they slam it in one gigantic try block, and then, well, something broke.
Yep.
Cool.
I
It's lazy and it's not good, and if that's you, knock it off. But again, to go back to your thing, we're not here to bash devs, so we also have to remember that they also have organizational pressure on them to write software as fast as they can. They do.
Yep.
There is that, and that sucks, and I'm sorry, and if you've had to do things that you're not proud of to hit a stupid deadline, that's on the managers, that's on the corporation, that's on somebody. But so that the knock it off I just threw out there, that's aimed at everybody who's contributing to this nastiness because it's in all the stuff we use now.
Yeah. And like you said, ultimately, if that is being done to hit those shortcuts are being done to hit some deadline defined by the company, that is absolutely the company's problem, right?
100%. And
At
what
some
I have tried to explain to multiple people at multiple companies, I don't care which department did it, I don't care which developer did it, I don't care which manager did it, doesn't matter. You're all that company to me. Every one of you is that
Yeah.
company. So when you're punting, your internal problems are not my problem. And if they are,
Yeah.
why am I? Because this is not a free thing for me or you or anybody else. We're paying one way or another. We're paying for all of
Yeah.
this. So when you're, this team over here didn't do their job, then report that up your chain, get it to somebody
Yep.
who will go over there and say, stop. What
And
again, I'm not here to run the company. I'm just here to say this is not acceptable behavior because it's costing me money,
and
my
time
boss,
and
and
effort
time and
and
effort and frustration. And like you ran into your deal, like, well, if I can't add another item to this authenticator, why would I use this authenticator anymore? I'm not going to sit around and so this then goes back to that little silo there that they've got going on of like, well, we developed this and then we've got our little PM here and all this. And they live in this little world of this little product. And you're like, I'm a user. I don't have to do that. I will just say, okay, you're not doing what I need you to do. This
yeah.
one will.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's why we get back to it doesn't matter to me who in the company did or didn't do something. It matters to me that you're all the same company. And if your company won't solve my problem, I'll find somebody who will.
Well,
But
yeah.
going way back to when we opened up this entire podcast here, we're now running out of people to go to.
Yep. Yep. And that's
So
coming, our example with the monocultures that are AWS and Cloudflare. And I mean, sure, you can't call them monocultures technically because they do have some competitors, not a lot. They still have massive market share. So, I mean, you can argue that it's a monoculture because of that. And to me, from a development perspective, me as the sysadmin, my expectation is that at some point, and it should be this way from the get-go, but at some point, documentation and proper error handling needs to be a priority for any piece of software. I can go all the way back to my university days. I've never been a developer by any stretch of the imagination, but I did take a couple development classes like you are wont to do in university when you're in tech. And I remember a Visual Basic class I was taking. Yes, I'm old. But I remember taking a Visual Basic class. And I don't remember exactly what our test was on. We had to build an application that basically did some solid integer calculations, right? You had a couple of fields that you'd put a number into and it would spit out something on the other end, right? Fairly simple application. And one of the things that I got dinged on is I did not have proper error handling in place, in that my professor went to test my application, and instead of putting in a whole integer like was my intention as the developer, what did he do? He put in an A and an X and a Y, and guess what the application did? It exploded into a ball of fire. Yes, exactly. And so the whole learning point there was, I need proper error handling to say, hey, user, this is not what the developer intended. Please insert a whole integer, right?
And then
that's a simple
immediately, as soon as you say that, I guarantee somebody's out there going, "Oh no, you need to do input sanitization." It's like, and what else did you need to do? What did you get dinged on? Your professor was 100% accurate. Because you know
Yep.
what you can do a little bit less of when you have good air handling is input sanitization. You
Yep.
don't need to track every possible thing a user might enter when you can go, these are the things that I want. And if you're not giving me that, I'm going to tell you didn't give me what I wanted. You can actually,
Yep.
it's okay to do that. And then people, SQL
And
injection. Nobody's doing SQL injection in these little. Did your app have a SQL connection? Come on, guys. Let's not. Yeah. So there's always
yeah.
this immediate. We'll spend. No, stop spinning. Stop spinning it. Error messaging, error handling.
Yeah.
Users make mistakes. There are things that are beyond their control. And then and my other pet peeve that's probably gonna it's about to come up. The whole users are stupid thing. Stop. Users are people. They're just people.
Yeah.
And if your app is so screwed up that they can't be stupid and still use it, still on you. But also users
Yeah.
aren't stupid and stop doing that. That's just childish.
Yeah.
And it was started as kind of a joke. And sometimes, yeah, we run into folks that we just soon not have to deal with, I guess. But the idea that users are
Comes with any
stupid and that's
job,
just the
really.
thing is like, yes, quit. Just don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a whole lot of should have, would have, could have. Really, all this stuff that we've been talking about. To me, any application, any tool, any piece of software, basic error handling and documentation are non-negotiables, right?
Non-negotiables, absolutely,
Um,
and they do take effort and
they
time,
do.
and they make, your, release cycles longer, and they do all that. They also reduce the number of support staff you need, they improve customer satisfaction. I'm more inclined to go back to something that is at least, like, not actively working against me.
Yeah. You know, there's something else that this all makes me think of as well too, is this concept of regular updates. And don't get me wrong, we need regular updates because bugs are found.
Mhm,
Vendors want to add additional features. There's a place for that. But I think that has become, what do I want to say? It's like the blind norm. Everybody just, that's the way we do it, right? The reason why I bring this up is I listen to the Security Now podcast sometimes, right? That's got Steve Gibson on it. He's been in the security industry probably longer than I've been alive. The guy also develops his own software. And he was talking about one of his colleagues at one point in time, who made like some assembly language application. He wrote it in assembly, but had gotten that application that his buddy was selling. His buddy had gotten it to a place where he deemed it to be quote unquote feature complete,
mhm,
as in this tool is done. The bugs are gone. He'd been maintaining it for years. There's no other functionality that needs to be added, right?
okay.
And so you, I guess my whole point with this is it kind of ties in with this driving need for software vendors to constantly be adding new features, new things, new stuff, instead of fixing the bugs that are in the product already.
Right.
This is, yes.
That
And I
is
mean,
where, okay, thank you for going there. I was like, where are you going with this? Because I can say there's a difference between feature complete and bug free. Um,
yes.
but this is going to go back to my other pet peeve that I haven't brought up yet, subscription nonsense. That, and a lot of people say this, if I'm going to pay for subscription to something, I don't want to do that. I don't want a subscription. Just let me buy a perpetual license. But then when I buy a perpetual license, I expect it to be bug free and I expect you to fix it. If it's not bug free, then they're like, but we're still spending money to keep it, and so that's where the subscription stuff kind of comes in. It's like, well, we got to do that. But then people are like, well, I'm not paying you a subscription fee to fix the bugs that shouldn't have been in there in the first place. So that's where all your feature stuff comes in. Well, we got to keep new features in it. So they've created their own problem in a lot of ways. And
Right.
also there is a sort of, we have to pay people. So if it's perpetual license, but we have to keep it bug free, how are we going to do that? And yeah, a lot of things come up, which we've tried a billion ways and they're all terrible. Like I was just complaining like, oh, so Microsoft drops bad software on us and then makes us pay $180 an hour for support. Okay, well, if I'm paying $180 an hour for support and they're using support fees to fix the bugs, then that kind of, and then like, oh, but the bugs shouldn't have been there in the first place. You know what I mean? So you kind of get in this whole circular.
Yeah.
So that's why I try to I can be upset and still have a little bit of understanding. Like everybody here has a problem, right?
Yeah.
It's not as easy as release bug-free software. If it was, then that would be a
Yeah.
differentiator. Somebody would come out and go, "We only release bug-free software." Cool, and nobody wants to sign up on that claim, right? So,
Exactly. And I get that. And so, well, we spent a lot of time kind of talking about the developer angle here, right? I want to swing the pendulum back to the sysadmin side here a little bit and talk about the impact of some of these bad practices that we've been talking about, right? And the big one I see is, I guess, what we would call in the sysadmin world, uh, technical debt, operational debt, whatever you want to call it, right? And we've kind of, in a roundabout way, talked about this a little bit already. Is that these issues, the state of the ecosystem as it exists today, ultimately creates a cost that someone has to pay somewhere along the line. And like you said with your example of the, you know, calling to get support, you're paying for support. You're putting forward your time to fix that, right? And so that's one very real downside I see to this whole ecosystem. Don't even get me started on things like memory bloat or bad defaults. I mean, those are all common issues with modern software that we haven't even touched on yet, right? But um, I I guess the other way I look at this is operationally, when all the when the software has been installed, the patch has been rolled out, whatever, the new feature's been added, the devs move on to the next thing, the next sprint, while the sysadmin has to live with the mess,
mhm.
right? That's an unfortunate reality as well, too. And so, you know, thinking about where we go here, right? We've talked about operational debt, we've talked about some bad practices. I the memory thing. I have
Mhm.
the memory thing written down on my list a couple of different places here, and the number of times I have had a developer say the words to me, just add some memory to it.
Yeah, because and it was because I know you and I have talked about this stereotypical developer in the past who also comes to you and says, "Well, the machine you gave me is not enough. I need 32 gigs of RAM and 14 terabytes of drive space and everything else." And it's like, "Cool.
I
Well,
need
that's the
all the
system you're
things.
writing the software on. So guess what system I'm going to need to run the stuff that you make?" Yeah, see? And this is where we go back to we should never have gotten rid of the testers because the testers would sit there with a little 1 gig machine, two CPUs, and yeah, you're using too much memory here, cuz this isn't going to work. And like my favorite things is everybody's always joking about how all the RAM that Chrome uses. Like, what do you think it's using it on? You think it's just like I'm going to just take a bunch of RAM and just sit here and fiddle? It's these JavaScript things that don't make any sense with terrible usage of resources are sitting there and spinning up and like, yeah, your little hello world web page is taking 32 gigs of RAM because your RAM is free. I don't care. Andy gave me a 32 gig machine. I get to use all I want.
Yep. I when if I'm really honest about it here, and again, I'm not bashing devs, right? That's not what this is about,
We can bash
but
bad devs. That's okay because
true.
I'm a software developer myself, maybe not full-time profession, but I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say this out loud, and I'm gonna get hate for it, and I'm fine with it. Is I spend a lot of time automating crap that the software should just do.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and that makes me a software developer because the guy before me wasn't or shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop with that. But so we
But I
can.
mean,
But I will also say within 100% staying in my lane. If I get a guy who comes out there, and it's and he's on my team, and I'm supposed to be able to switch places, reliably with this person, and all he knows how to do is next, finish, and he can't do anything else. I'm gonna bash that guy because he's making my profession look bad.
Right.
So it's okay to take these developers who can't, won't, refuse, no curiosity, won't get better, won't learn, just let me garbage this bad stuff out here. And then if you say anything, well, they'll spend all their time out on Stack Overflow going, you shouldn't be using tabs in your source code. You should only use spaces. Like, how about you go fix your code and leave us alone?
Right.
You know what I mean?
I was gonna, yeah, definitely. I was gonna say, like, when it comes to bad devs, right? The key thing that where I was going here was that when you're talking about resources, especially CPU, memory, storage, if you treat those as an infinite resource, that's lazy engineering.
100%.
I'm sorry.
And we're all glad that, and if you're fortunate enough not to, do you know what the tiny memory model is? Do you know what that is? Could you define it? And if you can't, good. I'm glad you don't have to do that anymore. But
right.
Y'all, it doesn't mean memory's free now. And I've seen people, I write in C#, so I don't have to worry about memory. It's like, oh, my dude. That's not what that means.
Oh, yeah. In short, if your app needs 32 gigs idle to show a login screen, we need to have a conversation.
Yes. Yes.
So going through my list here, right, kind of have the conversation of how we got here, right? I think another area that we haven't really touched on, and this might be a whole podcast all by itself, the amount of abstraction that exists in today's world versus how it used to be is incredible, right? Absolutely insane. So let's go back to my lab, my K3S lab, Kubernetes. So yeah, I spun up an apt cache service in the time it took me to drink a coffee or two, right? But you think about everything that was abstracted. The cluster already exists, so all the compute resources are already abstracted. The cluster's just handling that for me. The network traffic is abstracted across software load balancers, right? There's a lot of this abstraction happening on the hardware side, but on the software side too. So that container, that apt cacher container, contains a small operating system already that's already been configured by the container creator. There's all of these defaults that, as the sysadmin, I'm assuming are correct, right? There's a lot of assumptions that you now have to make with a lot of deployments because you just assume that everything in the layers underneath you are correct.
Yes.
And so that has contributed to this problem as well, too, I think. And I've heard this said many times, and I can say this because I'm just barely a millennial. I'm like right on the cusp between Gen X and millennial. So I've heard the statement say that, some Gen X and millennials are the only ones that truly understand how PCs work. Because we grew up in a time where we had to actually learn the underlying code, the underlying systems, whereas you look at like Gen Z or these, the newer generations, they've only known computing with all these abstraction layers, right?
Yeah, there's some truth to that, although I think we have it pretty easy too. So if you go way back before us, your first
binary.
Your first programmers had to know the electrical components of the computer to make it do anything.
Oh yeah,
they had
that's
to.
True.
And then your punch card stuff was like 1 degree separate from that, so you still had to know a whole lot just to do a punch card thing.
Man,
yeah,
punch cards are still mystical to me in a way.
But they shouldn't be. And I'm actually gonna jump on your abstraction things and something I saw that this poor guy's going viral for all the wrong reasons. And I kind of feel bad, but it's also what's that thing? People being confidently wrong on the internet. That's kind of where he was heading. And he's like, "No, I don't know what every line of my code does because." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm not triggered yet. See where this goes." He goes, "Well, so you go back to the assembly language programs. They don't know what every register is." And I'm like, "Yeah, they do. My assembly is terrible on its best day, and I know what every register does because it's really not that hard if you care to look." I also know how to sit down and build the relays necessary to make a register out of electronic parts because, again, it's just not that hard. It's really not. And then his next thing is, and the C developers, they don't know what every pointer does. And I'm like, yeah, every pointer I've ever written, I know exactly what it does. So on and so forth. But eventually you do hit an abstraction layer where you don't. Like if you're using a framework like React or .NET or something, you probably don't know everything that happens. But I will say, if you don't reasonably know how you would approximate what that framework is doing, that's a yellow flag, right?
I,
There's a point
I'll
where you
just
can only
vibe
know
code it,
so
Eric.
much. You can only know so much, and you can only develop at a certain, you can't understand what every single piece of assembly language is eventually going to come out of your code. That's not reasonable, not in this day and age, not for as
Yeah,
complex as software is now. But you should have an idea.
yeah.
It shouldn't be, I just throw lines of code at the machine and this stuff comes out and it's all magic and smoke and mirrors. It should not be that way because computers are really breathtakingly stupid when you get down to it. The
They do
CPU
exactly
part
what
of
you
it.
tell them to do.
Precisely. And
Yep.
there's no variance because they're binary devices. And if something is off, either it got hit with the solar particles, I guess, can actually disrupt CPUs, stuff like that. But that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. Like there's no wiggle room, there's no variance, there's no nuance. It's all very on, off, on, off. The whole thing is described in on, off, right? So,
Yeah.
like, again, I'm trying not to dunk on this guy real hard because he kind of has a point, but also computers are extremely deterministic. They're not magic. They're not smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
None of it. You can describe every single one with is it on? Is it off? The whole computer, the whole thing. Is it on? Is it off? Is it on? Is it off?
So I think this issue is going to get way worse now because of quote unquote vibe coding, right? You're going to have entire functions that exist out there that people have no idea how they work, but AI spit it out and,
Yep.
works on my machine.
Well, the good news is
Like,
at least all the attackers are going to go after that stuff because it's going to be the super low hanging fruit. So then my stuff,
right.
I'm not going to have to be quite as scared about because,
Yeah.
like, I use AI to boost my development, but I also go back and look at everything it does because
And
it's
that's the thing,
not
right?
great. It makes
And
so many mistakes.
that's how it should be used, right? I'm terrible at Python, but I can at least look at a Python script and tell
Yeah.
you what it's doing.
Which is what you
And
need. So what I do is I'll go in there and
yeah,
I'll start something and AI can really figure out, and it'll write like 50 lines of code and be like, I think I know where you're going with this. And then I can go back and go, okay, yeah, you messed up here, here, and here, and here. And I don't have to write all of it. And it's really nice for that. But just to go in and buy and just, if I just let these things do what Copilot thought they should do,
yeah.
no, 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 no. Because again, it hallucinates. It's like, well, you don't have this thing. There's no PowerShell line for this, so I'm just going to invent one, and that doesn't exist, and call it, and
Ah,
right
yeah. Yeah.
vibe coding.
So it's gonna get worse. What I want to wrap up with here, we've talked about a lot of the problems in the industry, right? What do we do? How do we kind of try to resolve this? And there's a couple of big things that I think would go a long way, right? This first one on my list, I've seen happen on both sides of the fence. I've seen both sysadmins do this, and I've seen developers do this, and that is, it works on my machine. We need to get past that. There needs to be a shared
Again,
accountability.
something started as a joke. It wasn't. It was never intended to be a response. It was just ha ha.
Yep, exactly.
Oh, you
There
mean
needs
that
to be a
machine with 32 gigs of RAM and a 9,000 core processor you made Andy give you because you had to write "Hello World" and you weren't sure how to do it? I mean that machine it works on?
oh yeah,
The one
yeah.
that Andy has to be over there every 6 minutes to fix because you did something else. That one? Uh-huh.
Yeah, uh-huh. Yep. So that shared accountability needs to be a big thing. I think all of us can do a little bit better on that. Um, Software needs to be seen as an ongoing responsibility, not just a one-time artifact. And what I mean by one-time artifact is, here's this new feature, or
Mhm.
here's this new version, or this, whatever, right? And when I say ongoing responsibility, I mean things like we talked about earlier, like the proper error handling, the proper documentation. Yes, that's on the developer side, but we as sysadmins can provide concrete examples of how it should be better.
Yeah,
So if I'm,
100%.
so if I come across an undefined error occurred, right? If I come across that error message, you can be damn sure I'm going to reach out to the developer and be like, maybe we should actually say what's happening here. And to your point earlier, if it's a security concern, dump the log somewhere in a
Do something
secured
with it.
place
Don't
and say, go look here,
that 100%. Something that the person can say, my next step to make this go away is.
Yep.
Because if it's just something
Exactly.
went wrong, well, what do I do with that?
What went wrong?
Yeah, where? What? Did I do something wrong? Because, like, all right, let me give you a good one. A real security thing. Once upon a time, you'd go try to log into something and it would say your password is invalid. So then an attacker would go, okay, well, I got the username right, so I'm halfway there, okay? So
Yep.
we stopped doing that. Now we just say, like, your credentials are invalid or something along those lines. We don't say we don't know what went wrong, because the reason we don't do that is because as a user, when you see that, you're like, well, did I mess up or is the system broken?
Yep.
You don't know. So, but if you say your credentials are invalid, you haven't really told me much, but at least I know the system isn't broken. And that's exactly where I'm starting on all of these things, is I know what to do next. Is if it comes out and goes, the server can't process your request right now, I'm going to assume that's on the server, and I'm going to give it some time, and y'all are going to fix it, or I'll call it, like you were saying, I'll call the dev. But if it says your credentials are invalid, I'm not going to call anybody. I'm going to, oh crap, I messed up. I need to go through password reset, whatever. I know what to do next. When you're just like, something went wrong, cool.
Yeah. It's so maddening when when that happens. Something went wrong. I guess if I had a closing thought here, it's that software, and when I say software, I mean both from the developer's perspective, both from the sysadmin perspective. It needs to be, I think all of us have gotten so entrenched in this churn, right? This process that the ecosystem has inadvertently created, too fast of development speed, right? Bugs, sysadmins getting fed up and blasting developers, right? It just creates this visceral, angry ecosystem. I think if we all treated software as a craft again, like a highly respected craft, and not, I can say this because I'm in marketing, it needs to be treated as a craft again, not a content pipeline.
Ah, love that.
I think that would solve a lot
It
of
would
these
help a
issues,
lot.
right?
Oh, that would help a
Yep.
lot. I love that. You need to, make that a highlight. That is a good phrase. What I want to have people do is, so there's a concept called first principles. Like when you get way too far away from something, you just kind of have to go back to the beginning.
Yeah. Yep.
Your program, whatever it is, has a goal. It has to do something. The only reason for your software to exist is to do something. What is that? Okay. Then
Yep.
if I, as the user, and I'm a sysadmin, and here's another complaint I've had a couple times. I'm trying to keep this short. Sysadmin user are not different people. I am using your software as a systems administrator. So it's not developer, sysadmin, user. It is, we're all users, we're all developers, we're all
Yep.
sysadmins. Okay. Your program needs to do a thing, and it needs to do it better, stronger, faster, more quickly than I could do it without your program, or your program doesn't need to exist. And that is your first principle. You have to make whatever it is better, stronger, faster, easier, something. In business language, we call it, what's your differentiator? Why do I pick
Yep.
yours instead of his? What is the difference? What is the differentiator? And if your program needs to have that. So like the thing that I've been sitting on for 3 weeks, like I have 3 different options here. 2 of them get it done. The third one doesn't, but I have to document all 3. Okay. This is driving me nuts. So this guy is taking more time than these 2 multiplied, combined, multiplied again, combined, I mean, what is happening here? But it looks pretty. It looks nice.
Right.
Not the goal of the software, is it? It's not development, or sorry, it's not like graphic design software. Its job is not to look nice. It's to get the job done that these 2 somehow figured out. All right. Soapbox off.
No, I think that's a great place to wrap up and call it good here. I think that caps off everything we've been talking about. So, I'd love to get you, the listeners. I'd love to get your feedback on this too, and especially if we have any developers out there. Again, this was not intended to be a bashing session. I don't think it came off that way. I hope it didn't come
I
off
hope
that
not.
way.
And it's not to bash all developers, because clearly it's not
Right.
all developers. And I mean, I think I
Right,
need to walk
exactly.
around with, here's your not all card. Just play it anytime you need to. I'm going after a very specific subset, and the ones who are making all the rest of you look awful.
Right. Exactly. And so I'd love to get your take on this too. What do you see as the issues in the industry, and how do you what would be your suggestion for making things better? Because I'm not sure this is sustainable in the long term.
It can't be.
Yeah.
It can't
So
be, because we're all going to just demand better, or we'll go back to not doing it. Because again, if I can't get it done quickly enough with this product, I'm just going to stop using it altogether,
yeah,
which will prompt me to do what you're doing with Authenticator. And like, well, if this isn't going to solve it, then I'll just go elsewhere.
going somewhere else. Yeah, exactly. So, well, Eric, appreciate you taking the time to stand on the soapbox with me today. That's always good having you, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
Definitely. And those of you watching or listening, thanks for spending some time with us. Hope you enjoyed today's episode and you found some value in it. Again, if you want to find all the links associated with the show, you can go out to www.sysadminweekly.com. Again, you can reach us by leaving a comment on the YouTube episodes or the Spotify episodes, or you can get directly into our inboxes at contact@sysadminweekly.com. With that, we'll let you get back to your day, and we'll see you again next week for a future episode of SysAdmin Weekly. Have a good one.